Hi, welcome to learnhowtogarden.com, and in today's episode of the 10-Minute Gardener we're out on the Ile De Re, and it's an island on the west coast of France, and we're here to talk about salt. And this has a real correlation with why we grow our own vegetables, and one of the things I think is really important about growing our vegetables, and that's it should be all about the taste. If you're not already subscribed to me at learnhowtogarden.com, there is a link directly above this film. Click on there, it'll take you to the website, input your email address, and it means every single time I put up a new film I can let you know, and also give you access to my free monthly newsletter. I'm here on the Ile De Re, on the west coast of France, on the Atlantic coast, to show you these salt pans. Now these salt pans were built by the Romans. They've been here over 1,000 years, and it's an incredibly simple system. What happens is that the dams at the end of the pans are open to allow them to fill with seawater on the high tides. Then the dams are closed, and what we're then allowing is just solar evaporation, the sun, to do its magic. And what you can see behind me are paladiers, or salt harvesters, salt rakers, and what he's using is a rake, a really fine rake, which is about 10 feet wide. And he's moving the water backwards and forwards in this pan, and the pan itself is very, very shallow with a clay bottom. And he's moving it around so that he can harvest two very distinct types of salt from this pan. The first type of salt that we get from these pans is what I'm holding in my hand here, and I hope you can focus on this, which is a very coarse grey, slightly grey colour salt. And this is called Ile De Re, grey salt. And this forms by, as the water evaporates, as the sun gets hotter, the small crystals fall gently through the water, and as they fall they form into large irregular crystals, and they contain lots and lots of trace elements, lots of minerals, as well as the sodium chloride. You've got magnesium, calcium, potassium, lots of iodine, and it gives this salt a really distinct taste. But what is fantastic about this salt is that there's no chemicals in it whatsoever. It's not artificially dried, there's nothing put on it to make it white. And because it's got large crystals, it means that when you apply it to your food, what happens is, although some of the salt automatically dissipates onto your food, you're left with a crystal of salt, so you get the taste of the salt, the taste of the sea, as well as enhancing your food. It's also about 13% moisture content, much more water in it than your average salt. And what that also means is that it doesn't take moisture from your food, and therefore you don't lose taste from your food. And from one of these pans you could expect to harvest about 160 pounds of this salt a year. So what we have here is a 3 kilo bag. You'll probably get a dozen of these. You can see along the edges of the pans the salt just in small piles that is being raked there. The second type of salt that we get from here is a much whiter, much finer salt. You can see this, which is fantastic for just putting onto the top of your food. The Ile De Re I tend to use for cooking. It's brilliant to pasta water. What we're showing you here now is a paladier, one of the salt harvesters, and the way this works is that first of all, he goes round all his salt pans, and if there is any fleur de sel, the very fine white salt that goes onto your table, that will have been scraped off gently and put into a salt basket to take away. And now we're going round the pans, and by using the large rake, this large flat rake, he's creating waves across the pan, and that means that any larger crystals will wash across this pan and sit on the side, which is the small white grey piles you see around the edge of the pan. But by agitating the pan, it means that any crystals that are in the water will actually, sort of heavy ones, will go down. They'll go through the water to the bottom of the pan, which means he can then tomorrow, by again pushing the rake across, creating these waves, it's like the tide coming in. Those waves push across the pan and they harvest the salt for him, because you don't want to scrape the bottom of the pan. You don't want to get the clay from the bottom of the pan into your salt. And this is how salt's been harvested on the Ile De Re since the Roman times. It's very simple. Most of these salt pans are owned by families. They've been in the same families for generations. It's slow food. It's all about the taste. You know, there's no mechanisation here. It's harvested in exactly the same way. And that's how we should be growing our vegetables. You know, we don't need lots of tricks. We need things that are all about the taste, and we can grow them so that if tomatoes on a plant, for instance, ripen at different times, that's okay for us as long as they taste like fantastic tomatoes. We don't need them to ripen all at exactly the same time and be a uniform colour so they look good on the shelf. We don't have a shelf, we just have our kitchen, and we are growing things for ourselves to eat. And this shows, you know, that even something as simple as salt, the condiment that, you know, is on all of our tables, you can choose to have a commercially dug out the ground by a great big machine, dried by heat, ground down so it's so dry that when you put it on your food, it actually takes away from the taste, to something like these salt harvesters where when you put it on your food, it enhances the taste. Thanks a lot for watching.
Où sont les pays qui invitent les poètes sur le fond de la mer, sur un nuage blanc, qui naviguent voiles au ciel, amarrés à leur verre comme des marins qui n'ont plus d'argent. Un navire qui chavire au bout de ses rêves, messager de rien, peut-être d'espoir, une bouteille à la mer qui part en conquête.